Okay, Anthony, I have some amazing news for you.
Okay.
It's buses 2.0, because I think an episode or two ago you were talking about like your love of mass transit. And there's this company you may or may not have heard of called Uber.
Yes, I hear about them once in a while. That's true.
And they have this whole new thing that is modern and innovative. And quite honestly, like, I don't even know why no one has thought of this before. They're doing fixed route rides along busy corridors during weekday commute hours in major cities like New York.
I saw this and I guess I can imagine that there are cities where this makes sense, that are sort of like transit deserts. Obviously, the United States in general like has terrible mass transit. Potentially, there's an opportunity for this. I am utterly baffled that they launched in New York City, where we have, not a perfect subway system, but a pretty good subway system. So it's like, do you want to take a bus, but it costs way more? No, I don't. So, and I should say also, like, there have been a number of startups in the past that have also tried to do, like, this isn't even buses 2.0. This is like buses like 4.0, because there's been many startups that are like, we invented buses, except this has to be profitable, which of course most public transportation systems are not profitable. And that's kind of why they can be as affordable as they are. Yeah, I don't know. I find this whole thing very confusing.
I'm personally very excited about this because whenever I'm in an Uber, I always am like, I wish there were like 50 other people in here with me right now. And I think that's really what was missing from the platform. So good on them.
Well, now that I know that both of you hate innovation.
Absolutely. 100%. Use that soundbite.
That's the theme of the show.
Exactly. Welcome, everyone, back to Equity, TechCrunch's flagship podcast about the business of startups. Today is Friday, May 16th. I'm Kirsten Korosek, transportation editor.
I'm Max Zeff, senior reporter.
And I'm Anthony Ha, weekend editor.
On the show today, we are going to talk about innovation. We'll chat about Chime's IPO and Databricks' $1 billion acquisition. And then we're going to get into the first theme, which is AI in the Middle East, and take a fun little jaunt into TikTok and its newest trend. I want to kick things off with Chime and an IPO, which my favorite topic, IPOs, S1s. I don't know if either of you followed this at all, but I have to say, normally an S1 has all this information that's super great. And this one was lacking. Chime is a digital consumer bank, and they did file their paperwork. This has been kind of a rumor since December when they filed this confidential S1 paperwork. And normally you'd get all sorts of financial, legal risk factors. But this one, as our editor Julie Bort wrote, has a lot of blank spaces. So we do not know how many shares or what price. We kind of know what they might be aiming for. Have either of you followed this IPO at all?
I followed it in as much as we've talked about it on Equity. And knowing,
You're
I guess,
not a user of Chime as a digital consumer bank, Anthony?
I'm not, no. But I know that certainly, there's a lot of excitement around, or, just hope that in the consumer fintech space, this could be kind of like a breakthrough into sort of opening up the public markets.
There is some excitement. I get excited about IPOs just because 2025 was supposed to be a big year for that. And it looks like this company is going to make the leap. They raised about $2.65 billion as a private company. And at least from Renaissance Capital, which is kind of like an IPO specialist, they believe that Chime could be aiming to raise $1 billion. So TBD on that. Some of the IPOs, I'm thinking of CoreWeave, that have now gone public haven't gone too well. But this one is an interesting area in, the world of banking. So maybe they'll have a little bit better luck.
I'm really fascinated. I feel like we've seen so much activity in the digital banking space in terms of IPOs and just kind of deal making in the last few months. I did want to call out one thing that was actually revealed on the S1, which is this $33 million deal with the Dallas Mavericks.
Well, to be clear, though, like Chime was the sponsor, so they were paying the money. They're interested in sports leagues. So to me, what was fascinating about that deal, which is they paid around $33 million over, I think it was like a 3-year period. And they got the Chime logo on their team jersey. But as Julie mentions, if you look at what their financials were, and had they not done that, they would have actually been profitable. So, it's not a knock on them. I mean, maybe having your logo on a jersey got incredible like staying power and value proposition. it hasn't always worked out well for other companies. But Cruise, for example, had its logo on a sports team in San Francisco. But, I think it's interesting to see where they're putting their money at least.
Yeah, I mean, this is a company that I think their revenue in 2024 was $1.67 billion. So like 33 million. And that's spread over, 3 years is,
yeah.
It's always a little bit funny when we talk about the dollar values on the show because it sounds insane to be like 33 million. That's not really that much money. But
that's
in the
pocket
context,
change.
Yeah, in the context of, how much money they're bringing in, it doesn't seem totally crazy. And it also seems like, I think a lot of times tech startups will say, oh, like we could be profitable if we wanted to. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's not. In this case, it actually seems to be true that like, it's like, oh, like we're spending more heavily on marketing because we're a consumer brand. We're a new consumer brand. We need to get Anthony to be a user. But fundamentally, that doesn't mean the business is on shaky ground or anything.
Oh, no. I'm glad that you brought up the sort of how crazy the numbers are because when we talk on this show and when we're writing about these companies, I'm wondering if you think $1 billion is a lot of money these days. And the reason why I ask, like, is it a lot of money these days when you see a company like Databricks buying a startup for $1 billion? Is that like eyebrow raising to you or no big deal?
$1 billion seems like a lot of money for a startup, not a lot of money for a public company, but also like those borders are more and more porous because obviously you have companies like OpenAI that are startups, but like the dollar amounts they're talking about are like dwarf that of many public companies.
Well, Max, you know the most about this, but Databricks, which is a data analytics platform, they did agree to buy a company called Neon for $1 billion. So is this a big deal in the world of Databricks? Is this a big acquisition?
Yeah, so Databricks has made a lot of these kind of acquisitions recently. In 2023, Databricks acquired the AI model training startup Mosaic ML for $1.3 billion. And then Databricks also acquired this data optimization startup called Tabular for, I think, close to $2 billion. So they've been on something of an acquisition spree recently. This latest acquisition is really kind of focused on this open source database software. And it's really centered around, Databricks wants to help companies build AI agents, and all of those AI agents need these custom databases. And this startup Neon is supposed to help with that effort. But I mean, I'm just really fascinated by what Databricks is doing here. I mean, they're acquiring all these startups. They're growing like crazy right now. To me, I mean, I really wonder who they're competing with, here and what kind of Databricks looks like in 5 to 10 years from now, and just the growth trajectory of this company. Like they're really providing so many data solutions for companies in the AI era. It does feel like they are kind of bumping up against kind of the like AWSs and Azures of the world right now.
I was looking at Neon and I was not familiar with this company beforehand, but you mentioned AWS, and Neon, from my understanding, is building like an open source alternative to AWS. Is that correct?
To one of the services, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did Databricks not have this like cloud-based database platform prior? I mean, is this a brand new product for them that they're going to fold in? Or is Databricks have something existing that is like an alternative to AWS?
So, Databricks offers a lot of solutions that kind of are similar to things that AWS offer. I think the real thing that the Neon acquisition enables is just people to kind of create these agents faster. I mean, it's not that like this is going to enable people to do entirely new things with Databricks that they couldn't before, but this is just going to kind of allow them to keep building these AI agents, these like custom ones for companies that I think is really interesting. Like I think that a lot of what Databricks does is go to companies, take their kind of unique data and say, we're going to house it securely and we're going to help you do interesting things with AI with them, and kind of, using the AI models from OpenAI, from Anthropic, like using AI models from all these other companies and, just actually helping businesses deploy them in real time. And this acquisition is in that effort. So I think they're a big winner here, in the AI agent kind of spree.
What's striking to me is you were talking about their acquisition strategy, just like the amounts of money involved in a lot of these deals, that it's, $1 billion for Neon, $2 billion for Tabular, $1.3 billion for Mosaic ML. And I feel like usually when you see a company acquiring at that like rapid a clip, it tends to be kind of smaller deals, smaller startups. But like these are all like pretty serious checks. And I mean, it suggests just that like, yeah, Databricks is a lot of money, is well capitalized and is willing to spend that money, but also that these are meant to be like pretty significant acquisitions that are really expanding the company and and its product in serious ways. It's not just about like hiring a handful of engineers.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, I think everyone is waiting for the day that Databricks decides to go public. I mean, whether that will be even though we're seeing some people file their S1s right now, I wouldn't bet on Databricks going for an IPO anytime soon, but they're definitely one to watch here.
Don't even tease me with that threat of IPO because, like that is my favorite thing. We're going to continue after the break talking about AI because it's an AI boom that we're in, but we're going to go to the Middle East for that. So stay tuned.
AWS just announced a very interesting deal, a strategic partnership with the Saudi Arabia-backed Humane. This is a recently launched company by Saudi Arabia's ruler, Mohammed bin Salman. And Amazon says it will invest $5 billion plus in an AI zone in Saudi Arabia. Kirsten and Anthony, I'm curious what you guys make of this in light of all the deal making that we saw in Saudi Arabia this last week.
Well, I'm glad you said all the deal making because, by the way, we should pull back a little bit. And it's not just Saudi Arabia. I mean, there's been a lot going on in this past week in the Middle East surrounding deals of all kinds, but quite a bit in AI. But since we're talking about Saudi Arabia, Humane is really interesting. I mean, like many of the companies that come out of Saudi, it is backed by the Public Investment Fund. But I am not sure if what I think of this AI zone and how important it is. And you're very deep in the AI space. Is this really a big deal? I know $5 billion sounds like a ton of money. I mean, we already set the standard before, well, anything above 1 billion is worth talking about. But what is going on here? How much of this is real?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things kind of going on here. And I mean, for context, we saw Sam Altman and Elon Musk travel to the Middle East this week with Donald Trump. It was a big collection of big tech executives. And I think what's going on is, I mean, on the one hand, Saudi Arabia is, I think, trying to divest a little bit from, being all in on just oil, basically. And they're trying to get more involved in this AI boom and kind of get ready for, the next generation of the world's greatest investments. And then on the other hand, Elon Musk and Sam Altman, I mean, they have tapped private markets to their limits. I mean, there is not much left in the private markets for them to really, get at. So they need to kind of turn to these pockets of money, around the world. And Saudi Arabia is definitely one of them. So I think that this is, a mutually beneficial kind of relationship for these big tech companies and for Saudi Arabia.
Also, like it sort of seems like a marking of like how completely that relationship between Silicon Valley and Saudi Arabia has kind of thawed. Like, there was the period a few years ago after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi where I don't think there was ever, there was too much money at stake for Silicon Valley to be like, no, we're done. But it seemed like they were at least making the gesture of like saying they were uncomfortable and taking a look at their connections to Saudi Arabia. Now it's just like all in. Like we will invest, we will take your money, we'll do all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw that thawing happening around under the umbrella of future of transportation, probably a couple of years ago, where you would see like an eVTOL company or a robotaxi company or any company working on autonomous vehicle technology sort of cozying up to either Saudi Arabia or other countries within the Middle East as areas to like that was clearly open for business and welcoming any kind of what I would call more deep tech. This feels different, though. There was so much deal making happening in Saudi Arabia this past week as part of this diplomatic tour. I mean, you saw NVIDIA, AMD, Oracle, Google, and Salesforce partnering with the Public Investment Fund in different capacities. It feels to me like a very different level of relationship. And I don't really know where it's going to go. in the sense that how much of this, as these big announcements happen, translate to real business?
Right. I mean, I think when you look at this meeting that we alluded to earlier on Tuesday between Trump and, Saudi Arabian leaders and a lot of big tech executives, there were a lot of big tech people there from Silicon Valley, but it was also notable who wasn't there. I mean, even though we just talked about this deal with AWS, Jeff Bezos was not in attendance there. Amazon's current CEO was not there either. Tim Cook, Apple CEO, Google CEO, all just weren't there. I think there still is some hesitancy to kind of at least put this public perception out there, to have the photos that appear in the newspapers, of these kind of meetings happening. But I can tell you, I mean, it's clear from the deals that we're seeing here that they're happening again.
Right. And when we talk about also just the AI zone that Saudi Arabia is trying to create, my sense is that it's not I think a lot of times when these tech companies sort of have teams, internationally, it's not necessarily going to be sort of the sexy stuff or the groundbreaking stuff. It's more sort of back office or data centers, which obviously for AI, that's hugely important. But it sounds like at least they're pitching this as something where actually some of the real model development and innovation could be happening in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. Also, I do want to mention before we move on that, we've been talking a lot about Saudi Arabia, but there are other countries in the Middle East, believe it or not. And as part of this diplomatic tour that the Trump administration has, and specifically President Trump has been on, he's wrapping it up in Abu Dhabi, I believe. And again, AI is at the very top of the agenda. So it's very interesting to see how it's not just Saudi Arabia focused. I guess the United Arab Emirates is very much wanting to become a global AI hub. And I guess there is a preliminary agreement between the US and UAE to import 500,000 of NVIDIA's most advanced AI chips. So you see more of this deal making expanding, well beyond Saudi Arabia into these other countries as well. But I want to close the show by going back. Do you remember, this is going to be 2000s, early 2000s, maybe, when the dramatic web series was a whole thing? They're back and now they're on TikTok.
Amanda wrote a great piece about this. And I remember seeing that headline, which is just the web series is back, only this time they're TikToks. And one of the things that's kind of happened in the media landscape is that what is a web series versus a TV series? There's not a hard border, right? So I was kind of curious what, she meant by that. And it seems like it's this idea of TikTok becoming kind of more and more professionalized, more cinematic, in the same way that YouTube kind of evolved from being anyone with a camera, super low production value, to now being you need a serious setup. It seems like TikTok is kind of moving in that direction too.
Well, yeah. And it's not the video quality in the sense of it used to be TikTok was felt very in the moment. You didn't have to have the super high production value. And then that is now changing. And also some of the topics. So less makeup tutorials and things like that happening on TikTok. This is even more personal, where someone's taking you through their life and you can follow along with that. And I think that is really the big shift. It's not just the production value, but sort of this almost episodic theme that's going on.
Yeah, one of the examples in Amanda's story was, this creator who is not doing the kind of get ready with me little things in the morning, but instead was watch me reinvent my life in a new city. And it was just a much more kind of personal, in-depth kind of storytelling through TikTok than I think we're familiar with, that we've seen in the last couple of years. And it's a really interesting time. It is more reminiscent of the web series kind of era on YouTube and all those other platforms from the early 2000s.
Well, and there's real money here too. There are companies, Reel Saga, so real as in movie reel, but they're a mobile entertainment startup, but that is doing these short form serial dramas. And they just raised $2.1 million in a seed round. So you're seeing some money actually going to these startups that are specifically focused on this area as well.
Yeah, I think that there's something really interesting going on in social media right now where I really like this story because I think that there is a lot of demand for these kind of hyper personal kind of creators on TikTok. And it's really popular, and on Instagram too. But at the same time, we're seeing so much of social platforms kind of get inundated with AI slop. And I think a lot of the platform creators are like trying to fill it up with more content and trying to make it easier for people to make low quality, kind of inhuman content almost. And at the same time, there is this demand for something that feels, genuine and something that feels like very personal and honest. And I just think it's a really interesting contrast. I'm not sure how the two coexist exactly.
Well, and which one makes money too?
Well, I was going to say, I think also you ask somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, I think the ultimate goal is that, we should have that personal connection, but they can just be with a bot. Like, why are these things mutually exclusive? Which I obviously there's at least anecdotally that there are people who develop these intense attachments to, essentially chatbots. Hopefully that doesn't become more widespread. I guess we'll see. Again, I think part of the feeling was this deja vu of kind of like what's new is old again. With any sort of new media format, there's always this excitement, but also like people kind of chasing the novelty of it. And then, probably 5 years from now, like so many of these companies and shows will be like completely forgotten. And that isn't necessarily to suggest that like it's overhyped or that there isn't something real there, but just that I think there's kind of a natural process of like whatever the shiny new thing is, that there's going to be people who are like, this is it. This is the future of media. And yeah, for some people, but not necessarily like for everyone.
Well, ultimately things evolve and then we tend to go full circle. I will say this though, in closing on our show, I am rooting for the human drama and not relationships with an AI friend.
Yeah, have a parasocial relationship with us, not with bots.
Yes, exactly. Well, on that note, we are out of time, but Equity will be back next week. Until then, you can find Equity under the handle at EquityPod on X and Threads.
Equity is produced by Theresa Loconsolo with editing by Kell. We'd also like to thank TechCrunch's audience development team. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.